I guess the best way to describe Rico, I mean, he's just always been sort of a freak. Um, I mean, there were times, so many times during games or during practices, and he would do things, and me and the other coaches would just look at each other, and can you believe he just did that? I mean, because I mean, and we'd all been around a ton of football, and then you see somebody do things that it just doesn't make sense that somebody can do those things. And Rico just did it over and over and over so many times on Friday night, even in practice. But I think people are seeing what he's doing on the field, and obviously we're really proud of him, and he's doing well, and he's helping the Panthers a lot, which is nice. But I think. I don't think Rico gets enough credit for how intelligent he is. Really smart player, really smart person, and he's an unbelievable teammate. He's one of those guys that when he was in high school, he's scoring all the touchdowns and helping us win a lot of games, and still has a major concern for his teammates. How can he help this guy play better? Or hey, this guy needs to get a chance to score. He'd take us down the field and we'd be inside the five, and maybe a guy that hadn't had a chance to score a lot. Let's get him the ball. Let's see if he can score right here. And I've heard through the NFL grapevine that in both in Dallas and with Carolina, it's kind of the same thing. I think that a lot of his teammates, look at him as he's a locker room guy. He's a guy that is willing to do whatever he has to do to help the team win. And obviously, I mean, he's a competitor. He wants the ball, and he wants a chance to do what he can do. But as long as the team's winning, I think Rico's one of those guys that he's going to do whatever he can and be a real positive influence in that locker room.
Yeah. When I remember when we would come to cover your guys' games, I mean, he was primarily, was he always the quarterback when he played at
No,
Reynolds?
no, he was a quarterback, or he was a running back the first 3 years. And
Right.
his senior year, we had all these good players and we had a good defense, but we didn't have a quarterback. And I mean, we did not have a quarterback on the roster varsity wise. And all our quarterbacks were real young. And so I sat down with my offensive coordinator that winter, and I said, he's the best player on our team. He's the best player in the mountains, maybe the best player in the state. So why don't we just move him to quarterback and snap the ball directly to him? That way we're guaranteed he's going to touch it every play. and and surprisingly, Rico could throw it. He could throw it, and like I said earlier, he's very intelligent. So he could run the offense. He picked up the new position, and um, we went all the way to the semifinals. I think we got beat his senior year in the semifinals by Weddington in double overtime, and so we had a great season. And um, but I think the biggest thing was, he was just such a good player. We moved him to quarterback because we wanted him to touch the ball every play, and we knew he would make plays for us. And I saw an interview. I think it was a Charlotte Observer thing or something. I don't know what it was, but it was another interview, and they asked him about playing quarterback, and he still says, he thinks he could do it in the NFL, a play here and a play there, and he probably could.
Yeah. Well, and I remember even when we would talk to him, he's kind of soft spoken, but you could sense like that competitive drive, like that fuel and that fire. So it's almost like he didn't necessarily brag or whatever, but he sort of let his work on the field speak for itself. Would you say that that's pretty
Oh yeah,
accurate?
yeah. I mean, he is a fierce competitor,
Yeah.
but he's not a guy that's going to go around beat his chest and say, "Look at me, look at me, look at me." But we would do things, and we would in games. He would talk me into doing this or doing that, and more times than not, it worked. And he always come back. I told you, coach. I told you. And I think the Panthers coaches are getting a little bit of that too. But but no, I mean, a lot of times in coaching, when you have these super talented guys, there's a lot of baggage that comes with them. And Rico was the exact opposite. I would, coaching him was just such a joy because he was obviously physically just gifted, but heck of a teammate, very intelligent. He loved his coaches and was very respectful. I don't know much more than that you could ask for from a player in high school. So to see him doing the things that he's doing now, I'm certainly proud as his former coach, but more than anything, it's just I know how hard he's worked to get there, and it just makes me happy that he is finally getting some of the attention that he deserves outside of Asheville, and it's pretty cool. Best athlete that I've coached. And I think there's a lot of different categories when you start talking about best players. There's I've coached a ton of really good players, and Rico, I used to tell people all the time, God only made a handful of Ricos. And and you see that when you stand next to him and when you watch him do things on the field. And I don't even think TV gives it justice, to what this guy's capable of doing athletically. But yeah, he is definitely the best athlete that I've ever coached, and one of the top three, maybe, players. But just because a guy's a really good high school player doesn't mean he's going to be a good college player and then move on to the NFL. I think there's a lot of different categories to it, and um, but as far as the kind of person that he is, and he's the top of my list that I will never forget. Just the time I got to spend with him, and going on recruiting trips and doing all the things that you do as a high school coach, and you really get to know kids. And he is just so genuine. He is a really, really good man and cares about people, genuinely cares, not just the guys in his locker room, but those people that come watch him play, and, kids that want to get next to him and talk to him. He's a heck of a dad. I mean, he's checking off all the boxes, and as a coach or his former coach, there's just a lot of pride, seeing, because we want them to do well football wise, but ultimately we know the game ends, and you just want them to be good men. And I think more than anything, that's what I'm most proud of, is just how good a man he's become, and scoring a lot of touchdowns and making people happy is pretty cool too.
You think some of that comes from his upbringing and his family?
Yeah, he's got a great mom. I've coached his brothers. They're a really neat family, and they're a really close, tight family. And his mom has been around the program, helping where she could help, and she just works so hard. And I think that's one of the things that drives Rico a little bit. He has seen how hard his mom has worked to make sure he's had everything that he's wanted and the opportunities that he wanted. Um, and I think he's kind of paying her back a little bit right now with what he's doing on the football field.